The autumn wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and the promise of change. Noor sat in the parlor, staring at the familiar, empty chair by the window. It was a place that had once been filled with warmth, with stories and laughter. Now, it stood vacant, as though it had forgotten its purpose. The chair had belonged to her grandmother, Ayesha, a woman whose presence had been the anchor of Noor's childhood. For as long as she could remember, that chair had always been there. Every morning, Noor would wake to the gentle creak of its old wooden frame as her grandmother sat in it, her hands gracefully knitting, the yarn threading through her fingers like the passage of time. Ayesha's voice, soft and steady, would fill the room, sharing stories of distant lands, of dreams lived and unfulfilled, of life's inevitable hardships and triumphs. The chair, worn with age and years, had been the throne from which Ayesha dispensed wisdom and love. But now, it was just an empty chair. The death of her grandmother had left a hollow echo in Noor's heart. It had been sudden, unexpected, a cruel reminder of the fragility of life. The funeral had come and gone in a haze, a blur of faces and words that felt distant, almost foreign. The grief that followed was like a heavy fog that hung over Noor, obscuring the world she once knew, and leaving her in a state of perpetual uncertainty. The chair, once a symbol of comfort and wisdom, now felt like a painful reminder of what she had lost. Noor tried to move on, to fill the silence with activities, with tasks, with anything that could distract her from the ache that gnawed at her chest. But no matter how many books she read, how many walks she took, or how many conversations she had with friends, nothing seemed to soothe the rawness of her grief. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Noor found herself drawn to the empty chair once more. She stood before it, her hand trembling as she gently touched the armrest, the wood cool beneath her fingertips. A sudden wave of emotion surged within her, a mix of sorrow and longing, and for a moment, she let herself grieve without holding back. Her mother, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, entered the room and sat beside Noor. Without a word, she took Noor's hand in hers. The silence between them was not one of discomfort, but of shared understanding. "You miss her, don't you?" her mother asked softly, her voice tinged with the same sorrow that Noor felt. Noor nodded, unable to speak, her throat tight with emotion. Her mother smiled gently, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "I remember when I was your age," she continued, "and I sat in that same chair, listening to her stories. She told me once that life is like a river. It moves forward, whether we are ready or not. But if we are patient, the waters will eventually bring us back to the shore." Noor looked up at her mother, her heart heavy but touched by the warmth of her words. "I don't know how to move on without her," she whispered. "You don't have to," her mother replied, her voice steady and reassuring. "Moving on doesn't mean forgetting, Noor. It means learning to carry the love, the lessons, and the memories with us. It means finding new ways to keep her alive in our hearts." For the first time since her grandmother's passing, Noor felt a glimmer of understanding. She didn't have to let go of the chair, or the love it represented. Instead, she could hold on to it, just as she could hold on to the memories and the lessons Ayesha had shared. The next morning, Noor found herself sitting in the chair, her grandmother's knitting basket beside her. The quiet of the room enveloped her, but this time it was different. It was a peaceful silence, not an empty one. She closed her eyes, imagining her grandmother's voice, the way it had always seemed to wrap around her like a warm blanket. The words came back to her, familiar and comforting. Grief is not a burden, nor, but a testament to the love we shared. It's okay to feel sorrow, but don't let it overshadow the joy you have in your heart. As the days passed, Noor began to sit in the chair every morning. She would bring her grandmother's knitting, or simply sit with a cup of tea, letting the stillness remind her of the strength that had always been present in that room. The empty chair, once a symbol of loss, had transformed. It was now a symbol of remembrance, of the love that transcended time and space. One evening, as Noor sat quietly in the chair, her mother entered the room and placed a small, hand-carved box on the table. "I found this in your grandmother's things," she said softly. "She wanted you to have it." Noor opened the box, and inside, nestled among delicate fabric, was a small, worn journal, Ayesha's. She opened the first page, where Ayesha had written, "To my dear ones, the stories we live are never truly ours alone. They belong to those we leave behind, and those who will come after us." Tears welled up in Noor's eyes as she read the words. She realized that her grandmother's stories had never truly ended. They lived on, not in the chair, not in the house, but in Noor herself, in the way she lived her life, in the lessons she had learned, and in the love that would always bind them together. The empty chair was no longer a symbol of absence. It was a reminder of presence, of the love, the wisdom, and the strength that could never be taken away. Noor understood, finally, that her grandmother had not truly left her. She was there, in the chair, in the quiet moments, in the stories that would continue to guide her, no matter how far she had to go. Moral: grief is not the end, but a transformation. The people we love never truly leave us. They live on in our hearts, in our actions, and in the stories we carry forward. The empty spaces in our lives can become places of remembrance and growth, where the love of those we've lost continues to nurture and guide us. Grief is a journey we all face at some point in life. How do you cope with loss, and what brings you comfort during difficult times? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt tales and life lessons. Let's continue this journey together, one story at a time. Let's learn some interesting words from this story. Inevitable. Meaning: unavoidable. Example: life's inevitable hardships shaped Ayesha's stories. Perpetual. Meaning: never-ending. Example: Noor felt a perpetual ache after the loss. Obscuring. Meaning: hiding or unclear. Example: grief was obscuring her view of the world. Transcended. Meaning: went beyond limits. Example: her grandmother's love transcended time. Resonance. Meaning: deep emotional impact. Example: the chair held a strong resonance for Noor. Gnawing. Meaning: persistent pain. Example: Grief gnawed at her chest constantly. Profound. Meaning, deep or intense. Example, she had a profound understanding of loss. Reassuring. Meaning, comforting. Example, her mother's voice was calm and reassuring. Transformation. Meaning, major change. Example, grief led to a transformation in her life. Enveloped. Meaning, surrounded. Example, silence enveloped Noor as she sat in the chair. Subscribe to Fairy Tale Spell for more stories that inspire growth, mindfulness, and self-discovery. Let's create a world where everyone learns to celebrate their own light.